I'm Dan Mullen, Camparina Success Group and Preferred Insurance Center. Obviously, we're just one of the co-sponsors of this, and this is Dave Cahill.
Hi, Dave Cahill. I'm with Avenula Consulting. To be brief, to help us make up some time, I have experience managing these types of issues, so I'm going to share with you some practical things that we've learned that can help you.
Again, I'm Andy Kramer, Director of Risk Management at Preferred Insurance Center. To save time, we're going to give this back to Dave and let him jump into the presentation.
So you see on your screen here this concept. We're giving you this material. It's yours to use. It's a public service issue, not a sales call. So please feel free to take advantage of the material you see now. We'll be emailing it to you, mostly in document forms, PowerPoints, Word, etc., as opposed to PDFs that you would find more difficult to access. So you'll have this stuff. You can customize it, use it to help protect your people and protect your business. Our objectives are to help you go beyond the basics of hand washing and really get the benefit out of hand washing that medical professionals intend, to help you improve cross training so that as your workforce faces the challenge of being out because of illness, etc., that you can continue to meet customer demand, recruiting and training replacement workers to address that issue as well, helping you to implement a workable furlough program so that if you find the need to reduce labor costs, you can do it in a way that's flexible and helpful to your people. And then just to help you respond to the distractions and the tensions and so forth that come from this type of issue. So that first objective, washing hands. Washing hands is just the simplest, cheapest, and by far most effective way to reduce the potential for transmission. Everybody knows this. However, we as human beings don't wash our hands often enough and well enough. So we have this very simple, very effective process that doesn't get utilized to its fullest. And we're going to help you create a program around that so that you get more out of this idea of hand washing.
Yeah, and I'm going to add that this seems simple, but doing it right, when I read over your protocols, it was quite amazing. So you want to switch over to that protocol now?
If you would.
And this will be downloadable. You'll get these documents. We'll send you an email. You'll have access to all of these. You can use them as you see fit.
So the Clean Hands protocol is designed in what we call a what, why, how format. Makes it very easy to grab onto for most adult learners. Most organizations find this very easy to use. So you'll see this again and again in this document and other documents. So what is it? Why is it important? When do you use it? How do you use it, etc. So why it's important is it's the single most effective method. This is chemical warfare to the virus. And we'll walk you through that in terms of why that's true and what you can do to get great benefit from it. So when you need to reduce the transmission of a toxin or contagious organism, this is just absolutely the best thing that you can do. So how do you do it? You follow the steps below. We've included what many of you might know as a RACI. We like to call it an ARCI because we like the idea of accountability being first and not responsibility. To us, accountability is the person who is charged or commissioned with ensuring the result is achieved, and responsible is the person who does it. They may or may not be the same person. So we like to see accountable showing up first in that chart. So how do you do it? You develop and publish the Clean Hands protocol. We've got this here for you. You can use to customize, but you could take it just as is and run with it. You then ensure the needed resources are available, implement it by briefing employees, and conduct the daily protocol again and again and again. So you can see there are suggested notion of who might be accountable, responsible, and so forth, but you can easily customize that to fit your organization. And the key tools are the clean methods, or the Clean Hands standard, the daily safeguard briefing, the Clean Hands protocol timetable, and the Clean Hands protocol resource chart. So we're just going to go through those very quickly. Hopefully you can then just lift this document and these tools and begin to use them to improve your system. So when we look at this tool, again, what, why, how? So it's the single most effective method. That's why it's important. You do this at least as often as called for in the protocol, and more often as, if it's possible, who does it? Everybody. So the first method there is washing your hands. So we see here a simple chart that you can lift and put in place in terms of washing your hands and the steps for washing your hands. The important thing here is the idea of 20 seconds. So we have some beautiful videos that you can plug into. We'll show you at the end of this briefing that show people in very simple terms what hand washing does. But in a very simple way, any soap works, any soap at all. And you can think of the coating of the virus as being a fatty layer. And when the soap hits that fatty layer, it simply pulls the shell apart on that virus and flings the internal elements of the virus apart, just utterly destroying the virus. The trick is you have to do that long enough. So if you can keep soap on your hands for 20 seconds, then you will absolutely devastate the virus on your hands. So this process of getting the soap everywhere, using plenty of soap, rinsing very well, singing happy birthday twice, and so on, is an incredibly effective process if people are doing it that way. If they're just doing it to fill the task, kind of getting their hands wet, popping a little soap on and rinsing it off, that's not going to be effective. If they follow this very precise protocol, it's very, very effective. Then, of course, we have the second method, which is to use hand sanitizer. Hand sanitizer works equally well as long as the alcohol content is 60% or more. Very similar process. So in both cases, if you're doing this and keeping the agent on, the soap or the hand sanitizer, long enough, it's devastating to the virus. The alcohol does the same thing as the soap does in terms of just ripping the virus apart. So a key aspect in this is to do what we call commitment lock. This is to make the personal commitment in public, square, at work, that you will wash your hands according to these standards. So what we do when we train people in this process is then look each person in the eye and ask them, will you follow this standard each and every time, and get their personal commitment to do so. This triples or quadruples the compliance once people have given their personal word in front of others that they'll do this. Again, making hand washing and sanitization much more effective. So we have that process outlined there for you there. And then the standards upon arrival at work or at the start of every meeting, per the schedule that we'll share with you, before and after going to the restroom, before and after eating, after sneezing, after cleaning your work area, immediately after pumping gas. So we've seen that pumping gas, the gas pumps, the nozzles and so forth are a huge vector for transmission. And making sure that you're sanitizing hands or washing hands after doing that before entering the vehicle is a very, very good and effective way to reduce the opportunity for transmission. Okay, so that takes us to the second tool, the daily safeguard briefing. So what you need to worry about, of course, is your people and the business. These two things collide and they become inseparable. So we have a process that helps you to do that, which is in essence a temporary meeting you can put in place at any level that you think is appropriate, at the shift level, at the department level, once a day, twice a day, whatever it might be. So again, you see we have this ARCI here, which many people call RACI, telling you how to do it and our suggestion for who might fill the various roles associated with implementation. And what I'd like to do is then take you to this process. This process is based on what we call the 1440 management system. This is a process we use in our OPEX system to help people have highly effective meetings in minimal time frame. And what you see there is a set of Socratic questions. The way the Socratic question works is a facilitator reads that question in its entirety and everyone answers. If everyone answers no to that question, we move on without discussion. If someone answers yes to that question, we stop, explore it, and determine if we should do something about it. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. So you can see these in front of you, and of course we'll be sharing them with you. You can customize them and so forth. And they work best when you construct the grammar such that No is good, and yes causes you concern. So you can see in the first few there, they're somewhat general in nature. Are there any EH&S issues that demand immediate attention, or DIA, as our clients often say? Are there any quality or sanitization or hygiene issues, et cetera? As you get further into the document, for instance, number 4, are there any staffing or other issues that must be addressed to protect throughput, prompt decision-making, or compliance? Number 6, are there any customer issues, so forth and so on. As you get further into the document, you'll see details quite linked with this issue of COVID-19. For instance, I believe it's number 13 there. My eyes are a little weak, but are there any work from home or rotation policy issues, et cetera? So this question set is designed based on years of experience and practice to help you with this type of issue, but you can feel free to customize it as you see fit. The notion is asking these questions again and again every day in this way, in this order, and having everyone from their slice of the business answering in a commitment-based way. No, we don't have an issue in terms of that subject from my perspective in the business, or yes, we do, and then addressing it can help you to bring a great deal of focus on the problem and make sure that your throughput, your revenue streams, as well as people concerns are all getting the appropriate attention they need with a high enough frequency to make sure that things stay in control. If you do get to a yes, we then have a process for creating follow-up action. So I want to share that with you.
I'd love to interrupt
Sure.
first to tell people that may look a little daunting at first. We've been running a meeting like that here at our office every morning for been about 11 months almost now. No, not that long, 10. And we're averaging about 6 minutes. It's fantastically effective. The questions about the COVID and things are added to our normal meeting, but it is one of the most amazingly effective organizational and management tools I've ever used in my life.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it. So you get a yes. You get a yes answer to one of these questions, and then you can use this work management system to track them. In the document below, how this tool is used is spelled out in great detail. But in essence, you number these follow-up items starting from 1 and going to infinity, and you just start filling in this form from left to right, and it becomes very obvious to you what to do. What is the question number that surfaced this, the day and the month, et cetera, so you can get back at that issue. You'll see the check mark there. When it's done, you can check it off. You see NLT as a column. That means no later than, and that's simply a way to establish high accountability. We will not let this date slip, or we're out of patience with this result, et cetera. And that way people know that they simply have to get this follow-up item done in the time prescribed, et cetera. We then have the follow-up itself, which we suggest you express as a result statement instead of a task statement. Our classic example is if you had a line down and you thought it was a pump that was keeping the line down. In a traditional way, we might say replace the pump or repair the pump. What we suggest you write is restore the line to operation, and in the notes, make note of the pump. That way, the owner is responsible for a result instead of a task. Always only one owner, but as many support people as needed. And then you put the date and time in deadline 1. If they don't reach that, we'll go to deadline 2 and so forth. But noting date and time changes the psychology of a thing, especially during these urgent times, and dramatically reduces the time to resolution. So we highly recommend it.
We're going to go past.
Yeah, so that's got everything you ever wanted to know about that system and how it works. You can read through that in 5 or 10 minutes and become well versed in it. So the next thing we want to talk to you about is the Clean Hands Protocol timetable. So when we tell people to wash their hands, everybody says yes, and yet things get in the way, and the hand washing doesn't happen well enough or frequently enough. So what we suggest you do is you put in a timetable that hand washing or hand sanitization will occur. We have an example of that here. And you do this and you make it a social event at work. You talk about it. We have a series of videos you could show. You can brief people on things that are happening at that time, but you break up the day, so to speak, and we all wash hands together, or we all sanitize hands together. You have to keep in mind social distancing when you do this, and some of the other protocols, so you're not violating one protocol to meet another. So you have to kind of design this in a way that's customized for your operation, your location, et cetera. But the idea is when we start the day, we're going to wash or sanitize our hands. And we're going to do it at 9 o'clock, and we'll also wipe down our work areas. Then at 11 o'clock, we're going to do it, and we'll sanitize bathrooms and common areas. Then at 1 o'clock, we'll do it, and we'll do the work areas again, and so forth. Does it have to be exactly this? No. Could it be less or more? Yes. But the idea is to have this process that keeps this in front of everybody, reminding everyone of the unique procedure and ensuring that there's sufficient frequency. So then we see key tool 4, which is the resource chart. These are just some basic questions to ask to make sure you have things set up, you have the supplies and equipment you need in order to animate your clean hands protocol. So have you designated a location for hand washing and hand sanitizing? So what we suggest you do, for instance, is take your entire workforce and break the workforce down into location by bathrooms, by sinks, et cetera, and designate that people will go to certain areas to do this if they're washing hands. And of course, they can do it at their workstation if they're sanitizing, right? So is everybody clear about it? Have you ensured you have the social distancing issues taken into account? Do your sinks and sanitization stations work? And are we checking those on a regular basis? Do you have enough of soap, tools, towels, et cetera, so that you can make this happen? Do you have a method for sanitizing workplaces in common areas so that you're wiping down especially handrails, doorknobs, et cetera? Do you have an inventory of these things so that you don't run out? We suggest at least a 10-day to 2-week supply. And has everyone been trained in how to do this and so forth? So this type of resource chart, someone can be watching, keeping up and keeping effective so that the process itself can't fall down because we don't have the resources to make it happen. These are just some suggestions that we've seen put in place and seem to be effective over the years. So we have the minimal level, which is following the recommendations of the CDC. And one very interesting one that's overlooked very often is to put cubbies outside of bathrooms so that people don't take cell phones and security cards into the bathroom. So security cards that are held around the neck become problematic as people are washing hands. Security cards that are secured by a clip on the belt become problematic as people go into the washroom, and as they do what they do, you can imagine that security card can hit the floor and hit some other things. The cell phone also has proven to be a place where that serves as a repository for bacteria and virus. So keeping those outside of the restroom can be very effective, right? And then having a cell phone sanitizing protocol, so sharing with people how do you sanitize a cell phone with isopropyl alcohol, et cetera, wiping it down, taking it out of its battery case, using a soft cloth, et cetera, so that that point of transmission can be addressed as well. In terms of moderate, we see these recommendations: changing clothes upon arrival at home, providing your employees with a home hygiene checklist, establishing wash hands before and after eating, and so forth, and having this loudspeaker-driven hand sanitizing protocol that I mentioned. So this is the moderate level. Establishing mini cafeteria periods, moving chairs apart in cafeterias and break rooms, eliminating chairs so that only so many people can sit down, so forth. And establishing waiting spots with a color tape on the floor that will conform with your color coding in the facility, but in essence, marking spots every at least 3 feet, but perhaps as much as 6 feet apart. And people advance to that spot when the spot in front is open if people have to wait in line. So you're creating an easy way for people to maintain social distancing. Then we see, in terms of aggressive, which is people changing clothes upon arrival, closing all cafeterias, fridges and break areas. Everyone brings their lunch and eats at their desk, serving only bottled water, no cups, etc. So as we find we have to take further and further precautions, these precautions listed have been practiced in the workplace before. They're implementable and they help. So they're there for your review.
Okay. Back to the presentation, I assume, right?
Yeah. Okay, so the next thing is cross training. As people are out and you have skill sets departing, arriving at operational flexibility that lets you continue operating is very, and serving your customer, et cetera, is very, very important. So we define operational flexibility as a state that lets every person do every job. That's an ideal state. Very few people can actually arrive at that. But you use that conceptually to figure out where you are and where you need to go. So the greater your operational flexibility is, the more protected you are from adverse conditions like people missing work, et cetera. So how do you do this? You develop what we call a job matrix. You determine your flexibility rating. You develop a plan to increase that flexibility rating to the level you need to be protected during this issue, and then you implement the plan. So here's a flexibility matrix. It's a very simple thing. You put the jobs or the tasks across the top. You put the employees up and down, and you simply note who is able to do what. If every box was checked here, that would be 100% flexibility. We see in this example, we have about 57% flexibility. Now we can see by people, when they work, where they work, what jobs they can currently do, and what jobs we need them to do, et cetera, during this time. We can begin to kind of highlight these gaps and make a plan for how we're going to fill them. To make training happen very simply, we suggest you use SIPOC. SIPOC is a well-established lean tool. It stands for supplier, input, process, output, and customer. You simply note the process steps of that task down the middle, and then begin to ask, what are the inputs do I need to complete that step, and who do I get them from? What does the output look like once I've completed that step, and who is the customer of it? This is a very simple tool to build a process view and the key elements of a job. An experienced person can do this very quickly. With this, then, we can make very concentrated, very effective training. We believe that training in its simplest form has 3 touch points. It's making it meaningful, keeping it simple, and making it stick. And this can help you to make it meaningful. No problem. So the next is a job aid, which is to build a simple job aid based on standardized work. So we can take then each one of those process steps from the SIPOC and begin to wrap some meat around it so that we can very quickly get to the essential elements of a job for people. We call this task, condition, and standard. So you see here, right there.
Okay.
So we see here, mow the lawn, and the condition is given a ½ acre, a functioning push mower, and half a tank of gas. Do that to uniform height within 75 minutes. And then some how-to guidance. So these things can be developed very simply with very simple documents that can guide people through the essential elements of a job quickly. Then, in terms of making it stick, this verification process can be used, just a 3-tier verification process. You can add this to the bottom of training forms, get people to sign off on this, so to speak. Quite simply, so the trainee is saying, I've been trained, I've been able to ask questions, I got answers, and I can do this safely in the standard. The trainer saying, I've observed that person, and yep, they can. And the supervisor saying, I've talked to both of them and we're ready to go. This will ensure that we don't put people on that aren't prepared, and that we've done all the basic things we need to prepare someone. So these 3 simple tools in conjunction with the flexibility matrix can help you zero in very quickly on where you need to train people to increase your operational flexibility and make sure that your process continues flowing. All right, so recruiting and replacing hourly workers. So one potentially piece of good news is that there will perhaps be people available to work that weren't available in the marketplace before because of this upset. And so you may find some candidates that you weren't seeing before, right? So at any rate, you've got to close up gaps in your roster. The best way to do this is to start a pipeline, start it ahead of time, get people into a warm position that you're ready to go if you need them, etc. So one of the first things that we'll advise you is don't delegate hiring to HR, make it a manager responsibility. Have HR provide a process, but the managers do the hiring. This is a key thing in terms of hiring people quickly and effectively. So then develop a process flow that shows the steps of your hiring process and guesstimate the number of days it takes to pass a candidate through each step. You'll be 90% accurate just by your guesses, and it's good enough for decision making. So reduce the time to hire by reducing the time it takes to get through the longest steps. It's that simple. Now that you see this process flow in front of you, focus on those steps, and that'll help you to speed the process up. So you identify those points where you lose the most candidates is also a good place to look in terms of shoring up the process. So for instance, if you lose a lot of candidates after you interview before the job offer, interview them and provide them an offer contingent upon background, drug screening, et cetera. Right then and there, eliminate that as a process that gets delayed. If you lose a lot of people during drug screening, then put the drug screen first and only process the people, we move the people to interview, et cetera, who make it through the drug screen. So once you can see the steps in the process, how long they're taking, where you're losing people, which is just guesstimation, you don't have to make it science, that's good enough to decide, then start to modify your process and hone in on those places so that you can bring in people quickly. If it's possible, hire people in one day. Do job fairs, get applications, interviewing, and all that done, testing done. You can organize that so that you can move people right through the process and give them a contingent job order right then and there. So that's what we suggest you do to recruit and replace hourly people. In terms of salaried workers, do as much as you can. It says as much as you can. That's an interesting typo, but do as much as you can by phone and Skype. So develop the same kind of process flow, estimate the steps, and identify the points in the process where you lose people. Focus on those, just like you did with hourly people. Make the recruiters use a pre-screening template so they only forward qualified candidates, and have HR do a pre-screen, a telephone screen. We have those templates to share with you. I'm going to show you the pre-screening template now. So we're going to just break out of this and let you see that, and then we'll come back to this screen. That's not the right one, Dan. It'll say pre-submission.
Oh,
Probably a PDF.
sample pre-submission, this is it.
Okay.
Now we make it bigger, quick?
Yeah, please. So what we do here is ask a series of yes/no questions. And Avanula, we're big on yes/no questions. It keeps things simple. And we divide them into needs and wants. So the grayed out questions at the top in this example tell us the needs. So does the candidate have an engineering degree? Does the candidate have at least 3 years of engineering experience? So forth and so on. All of these must be yes. If they're not yes, we don't have a match. And we can put the explanation over on the side. So you'll get this as a Microsoft Word document. You can customize it very easily. Make your recruiters or the people who are sourcing your candidates do this for you. You can see very clearly then in terms of the things you care about, does the candidate meet it or not? If they're not meeting the wants, let's not carry that forward. So then down below, in the questions that are not grayed in the background, or excuse me, if they don't meet the needs. So down below, we look at the wants, and then we can see, do they meet that want or not, and what's the explanation? This reduces the qualifications and the preferred competencies and so forth to a one-page document that you can very quickly and very clearly see. This puts your recruiter to work for you instead of them just shoving resumes at you to help you pass through a greater candidate pool in less time. We're going to go back to that same slide. So the other considerations here are don't let candidates get cold. So have a formal process to make sure you're touching those candidates every 3 days, even if to say no news. But don't go a week or longer without talking to candidates. It's very disconcerting to them. It sends a message to them about you as an arrogant employer. So follow up in very simple ways. It's a very simple email. Doesn't have to have a lot of explanations, or a very simple note on LinkedIn or wherever it might be. Meet about open positions at least twice a week and set dates for each candidate to complete each step in your flow. So you've developed a flow, series of steps for your hiring process. You should be able to have that as a simple chart going from left to right, and the candidates going vertically on the page, and note by what date that candidate should pass through that step, and drive that process just like it was a manufacturing process, and hold someone accountable for speed there and so forth. So, okay, so the next thing we'll talk about is furlough. If you don't have a furlough policy, we can send you a template. It's very effective at leveling behavior. As a matter of fact, it can turn a negative into a positive in some instances as people enjoy this flexibility during this trying time. So to us, furlough is a voluntary reduction of hours worked and pay received without reduction in service time or benefits. So we're very careful to suggest that definition, that if it's no longer voluntary, we suggest you don't call that furlough. That's layoff, and keep the two separate. So you should have a process, so to speak, or a policy, and then a way to call for furlough volunteers, to put it out into the system. Your process for deciding who gets furlough should be well laid out and very visible to everyone, so that it's fair and it takes the needs of the company into account. But it's a very clear process in case more people respond to your furlough than you have the availability to provide for. So have a process for tracking who takes furlough, so it's not excessive or unbalanced, and for tracking the savings. And again, we can send you a template if you want, but this is a very, very effective way we've used for decades to level your labor costs during these types of times. And again, it can be anxiety reducing for people. It can allow them to pursue and do other things without fearing like they're losing benefits or losing their position or seniority in the organization. So we highly recommend that you have a furlough process. So preparing for distractions. You need to anticipate, proact, and react to the distractions that are going to happen. They're not all predictable. So having as much planning in place as you can is important to free you up so that you can, as we say, TPL, or think, plan, and lead as these other unexpected things happen. So we suggest you appoint a coordinator to stay on top of issues that surface, that releases operational managers so they're distracted as little as possible. That you hold a brief daily meeting with senior leaders using the daily briefing questions that we provided. That you develop alternate work schedules. There's some very interesting alternate work schedules you can develop, of course, like going to 12s if you don't now, going to 12s just on the weekends, going to 4 shifts for 7 6-hour days. There's some very interesting things you can do to make sure coverage is taken care of and allows people to take care of things at home. So that's something you should begin to consider and have in your back pocket. Have a very clear process for checking the sick out of work and the recovered back into work. so that you don't run into any issues with people feeling as if some people are treated differently than others, et cetera, which can cause great distraction for you down the road. So devise alternate routes for suppliers and deliveries. Double check your inventories, especially perishable materials. And double check to us means in these cases where things are critical for your business, you might have two people checking, one person looking and one person checking that they checked, so to speak, at the same time, to avoid mistakes, to avoid pencil whipping, et cetera, at a time that it could cause your process to come to a halt.
I'd like to add that that daily briefing meeting is so good at making things come up and get taken care of. When it's run well, and maybe I'll find a way to put out a video of one of ours, but it gets things brought to the forefront very quickly and handled very quickly, that otherwise somebody has to look for a place and a time to bring it up. And it also frees up people from getting 25 questions throughout the day at different times. And instead, everybody knows, okay, I'll bring that up at tomorrow's morning meeting.
Sure.
Okay. It's very effective.
Oh, well, thank you for sharing that. So another way to prepare for distractions is, as that coordinator is looking at each new guideline that's coming out, restriction or rule, these are 5 questions we suggest you run each of these changes that's happening to us in society, happening to us through compliance, et cetera, or government dictate, that you ask these 5 questions. How will it affect our people, and what should we do about it? How will it affect our operations? What should we do about it? How will it affect our customers? Again, what should we do about it? Our suppliers, what should we do about it? And our community. So we suggest that those 5 questions can be asked and answered by that coordinator in preparation for review by management people. They can tweak it from there, delve in, ask additional questions, and so forth. But it starts this process of proactively responding to these things that are going on. So let's go to the next one. So in terms of health and security issues, the 5 questions will really help you, and the daily briefing will really help you do that. One issue that stands out is fatigue. We highly recommend that you have a process for addressing fatigue. We have this sample policy that you'll have available to you. You can take it and customize it. But working people past the fatigue point is unhealthy, unsafe, and brings great risk to the business. So what we suggest is you have this kind of process in place. It's shepherded by supervisors and employees. And when employees feel fatigued, they're trained that they're responsible to say so. Supervisors then make an assessment, and you figure out what's going to go on from there. So this idea of working people past the fatigue point can be a very tempting thing to do for all parties concerned. And having this process in place, showing a good faith effort at preventing harm from fatigue, is an essential during these times. So the summary, we wanted to communicate how to go beyond telling people to wash their hands, provided you with the Clean Hands protocol. We hope that you'll be able to review that and implement it. To dramatically improve cross-training, the idea of using the training matrix, then zeroing in on where you need to do that training, and very simple ways to make that happen. Recruiting and training replacement workers, we provided you with some thoughts and tools about how to do that very effectively and as quickly as possible. We recommended that you have a work furlough program and provided a tool for you to, at least as a starting point for your policy. And then we gave you some ideas about how to prepare for the unexpected and the things that will arise associated with socio-technical issues and stress, and health and safety and security, specifically drilling in on fatigue and how you might battle that. So with that, we're going to move on to the next presentation. Oh, I'm sorry. These are great YouTubes you can watch. How to wash your hands. There's several of them. I think they're mostly over on the left-hand side of your screen. On the right-hand side, we have how COVID-19 affects your body in very simple terms, and the value with graphical terms of washing your hands and how Soap absolutely destroys the virus. These are great things that you can show in just a few minutes during your daily briefing. There's enough there for you to show one thing a day for more than a week. We'll keep adding things to the list for you that we find, and you'll find things on your own. But these are great at teaching people, refreshing this idea, and keeping it up and in front of everyone. So we wanted to give you enough to give you a head start.
All right, now the next one is about safeguarding your business. So we're just gonna move right into that because we are not running short on time, but we want to make good use of your time, so.
So again, a no frills approach. All of this stuff is yours to use, customize, make your own. One thing of note is in the side of this that's protect your business, this is a much more highly unique issue from company to company. So we're not able to get into huge specifics here. If you need help in this regard, you can call us and we'll help you. But we're going to give you the basics that we think you need to tackle this issue. So let's
And
go.
obviously in the follow-up email, we'll have all our contact information.
So the objectives: creating a crisis management center and developing a deployment plan. The third, developing a strategy to preserve your primary value stream. The fourth, engaging your people and all of those stakeholders around you in developing a secondary value stream. And then the last, developing contingency plans so you stay on track. So, I think we skipped a slide. Did we? Seems like we're missing a slide there.
There's nothing in between.
All right, well, let me talk about the first objective. You can just put it back on that page just for a moment. So in terms of this crisis management center, you should dedicate a room or a place where information can be gathered, charts can be put up, your work management systems that we showed you from the daily briefing, and those questions can be posted, etc. And if you can, ideally release one person to serve as a coordinator for this issue, so that they can kind of focus these issues and follow up on them, prepare, do thinking and research, etc., so that those managers that are in charge of daily operations can be as highly focused on that as possible. So, all right, so let's go to the next. I'm sorry we're missing that slide. So in terms of a deployment plan, what is this? It's a temporary org structure. It helps you to get the most out of the team you have in a crisis, and when you use it, when the current deployment or org structure won't achieve the mission. So as the mission changes because you're, for instance, focusing on a secondary revenue stream as opposed to your primary revenue stream, or key players are missing, you may have to completely reorganize in the moment in order to keep that mission functional. So here are the steps to do that. We suggest what you do is define very clearly what the temporary mission is. Without regard for the current structure, define the temporary roles and reporting lines you need. So kind of take a from scratch attitude in this regard and build that. Then put everyone's name. For larger organizations, maybe it's just every manager's name on a yellow sticky and post it on a wall. Everyone is up there for you to review and consider. So then form an ad hoc deployment team, a few senior managers in HR. Consider everybody on the wall to fill the roles. And as you do, move them over into the structure to fill those roles. Then identify a backup for each role, and if possible, a second backup. Then develop a brief list of duties for each of those roles. Hold a deployment meeting, assign everyone, and brief them on the duties. This is number 9. It's last, but it may occur sooner, which is to take your culture and other organizational issues into account when you're planning and executing this. So you're not doing anything destructive of your culture or of the arrangements that you've made with people. But you want to create as flexible an environment for planning and redeploying as possible during this trying time, as opposed to being so constrained by your current org structure that you simply can't meet the mission. So I see what's happened here is we just flipped these in terms of,
Didn't
right?
we? I was
Okay.
thinking that might be the case.
Yeah. So in terms of that crisis management, we can say a little bit more. It's to establish this management system that we talked about in a dedicated room and so forth. And we recommend that you use the process that we have in Avanulo we call Zulu. So Zulu is based on a historical battle where a very few people had to defend themselves against many thousands of people, more than they had to defend, and they did so successfully by employing a very unique strategy that's outlined in this presentation, Zulu, that we'll share with you. We'll send it to you. But in essence, then we have these 7 steps, which is to declare war on the enemy. So state the objective, which is to maintain our revenue stream, or 70% of our revenue stream, or whatever it might be during this time. Send out the scouts. This is the establishment of a time-based metric that lets you know what's going on, lets you know if the enemy is coming, so to speak, right? So that is perhaps how many orders you're filling. If you're not watching that closely, you may want to be watching that very closely. What your throughput is on a secondary stream that you didn't watch closely before, et cetera. How many people are out, that kind of thing. So then prepare, identify the people, resources, and capabilities you have. So the process that they used in this very famous battle at Rorke's Drift was they put everyone on the wall to defend against this attack, but they pulled 1 person in 3 off the wall and formed a bayonet squad. That squad stood in the middle of the defensive position, and when the enemy was about to overwhelm one particular area, they would run there and bring great strength, shock and awe, if you will, on that area where there was about to be a breakthrough. And in that way, they were able to defeat or at least stave off a much larger enemy for a long time. So that's the concept of Zulu, is that we would form a specialty group, if you will, that will attack this issue. So you deploy the team, and they pursue this issue as it comes close. You continually check with the scouts, in other words, that metric, to see if you're still faced with the issue. Keep reforming this bayonet squad, if you will. Once it's over, return them to normal duty, and then make sure that you're recognizing them. So these are the 7 steps in Zulu. We'll send you the presentation. People often find it very effective. As a matter of fact, I've got 4 or 5 clients using Zulu right now to defend against COVID. So, all right, let's go to the next one. So preserving your value stream, the primary value stream. There's no magic here, but the devil's in the details. So we suggest you use a classic SWOT analysis to address this question. How do you keep our primary value stream operating at current levels, at 75, at 50%, whatever it is that you've set out for yourself? You consider preserving the current revenue stream and acquiring new revenue in that stream. You assign outcomes rather than actions to individuals. So instead of saying, go check and see if you can find 5 new clients as an example, it's identify $150,000 of additional revenue, that kind of thing. So then you brainstorm, and we suggest you use the Avanulo tool called ARBO. ARBO means tree. It's a way of creating opportunities, and then subsets of opportunities, and subsets and subsets of opportunities, so you can break it down into small enough detail that people can go after it. So this 1-pager, ARBO in a nutshell, we'll be sending to you. It tells you how to do that, how to have that brainstorming session using this linking tool that links value to action. The other thing we suggest to preserve your primary value stream is to do Gemba. Gemba is a lean tool about being in the workplace in a way that lets you see what's going on, ask why, and show respect. This is not management by walking around, and it is not an audit. It's a highly stylized lean tool that opens people up to tell you what's going on so you can reduce your gap of knowledge. Very often, we as leaders in the office think we know what's going on, relying on the reports of others and documentation, and our gap of knowledge is very high. Not too bad during normal operations. During a time like this, it can be disastrous. So we suggest that you use the Gemba process, train your leaders on it, and implement it. It's a very simple thing to train on and begin to practice. and that you focus on the leadership kata. So we're sending you our slide presentation on Gemba. You can use that to train your people and begin to get them thinking in this mindset of going there, asking why, and showing respect. And then we also provided for you the 5 leadership questions, or the leadership kata. So that's on the next slide. So you see here the classic kata questions coming out of the Toyota production system. What is the target condition? What's the condition now? What obstacles are in your way? Which one are you working on? What is your next step? What are you going to do to address that? And when can we find out if it worked or not? Then you see in the middle there the intention for each kata question. What we have learned to do is move away from the very precise wording, sometimes in the view of clients, stilted wording of the classic kata question, and invite them to design their own kata question that meets that intent, so that it'll flow more nicely, more smoothly in their culture. But this idea of these 5 questions again and again as you're walking, talking, and so forth are very helpful in terms of keeping everyone focused on the next thing. This is a proven method that's been around for 70 years, and I just can't speak highly enough of it. If you're not using it now, it's very simple to implement, very inexpensive, and I highly encourage you to do so. So the next is to create a novel value stream. So every business has a treasure trove of hidden value that you can use to generate revenue. We've seen this time and time again in our interaction with clients. You can put a team on it with a goal of generating X dollars, be creative, and use a simple pick sheet to sort the opportunities. So what's the opportunity? It's estimated value, the cost to implement it. Then is it difficult to put in? What's its risk? What's its time needed? You simply multiply those scores together to get a total, and that tends to guide you towards which of these opportunities you should select once you look at the annual value and the cost in conjunction with those implementation considerations. So from there, you can prioritize new revenue streams. I wish I could take you through this in great detail, but this is a very highly unique thing for each organization. I will, however, say that this process works, and that this idea of treasure troves in your business is absolutely true. You can do great things for society and for your business now that may not be readily apparent, but if you put a team together and think about it, I think you'll be surprised. I have some examples on the next page. So an example, a classic example we use in training is the restaurateur during this type of outbreak who now has no clients, but has worked in advance, but in some cases you could do it after the fact, right? To provide the meals to the local FEMA office that now has a group of 40 or 50 people working around the clock that needs meals. So the next is a line printer. Very interesting experience I had. There's in the box industry, there's very high-end printing with labels that go over the box and give you almost magazine quality graphics in order to sell your product while it's sitting on the shelf. And then there's very, very simple, almost stencil printing that just labels the item, today, for instance, tissue paper or toilet paper, right? So what I saw personally in my past experience was a very creative executive who went to his competitors' clients who were using the very fancy labeling and suggested an archaic technology. All of his plants had this technology sitting in the back, not being used, but still available, which was to print line printing, which gives you a nice graphic, but not color and not very, very high resolution like a magazine, but still very nice graphic. And his argument to them was, you've established your market with these wonderful labels. You don't need to pay that much to go on. You could use this graphic and save a lot of money. And he earned a lot of business taking it away from his competition in that regard. He then went to his own clients and said, you're just stenciling. You could upgrade for very little money and get tremendous advertising capability. And he upgraded his clients. So this was a fascinating way to generate revenue that was based on machines he had which were not being used. He took a picture of all the printing crews, turned it into a die, threw it on those machines, and they reluctantly started getting it working. They didn't realize it was their picture. And as they saw their faces in the line printing come out, they scrambled across those machines in a very motivated way to get that thing zeroed out, and those folks made a lot of money. So we all know the story about the failed glue that became Post-it notes. We know right now that liquor companies are generating from fusels and other byproducts, et cetera, hand sanitizer that can be used during this crisis. Most of them are giving it away. That's a wonderful thing to be able to do for society. You can consider renting your storage space to others, leasing your equipment to others, leasing your workforce to others, selling your management expertise to others. So there are a great many things you can do to create a novel value stream during this time frame to protect the organization. And the last thing that we have is about contingency plans. What we suggest you do there is you set triggers for each of the key budget line items. If we become this level of unfavorable, now you've defined crisis. Once we get to that level of unfavorable in this key budget line or that key budget line, we're in crisis. And what you can do then is assign someone to each one of those key budget lines to develop a backup plan so you'll be ready if you enter into that crisis territory. You can use our risk management tool from PlanGuard, our project management system, to do so. We have that included for you. That's on the next page. This is based on Kepner and Trago's classic plan analysis system, the type of planning and project management process that was used to put a man on the moon and is used in the aviation industry. So simply here we see a task in your plan, so to speak, or an item of business. You ask what potential problems there are, what are the likely causes, how can you prevent them, what contingent actions can you put in place, and what contingency alarms will you put in place to know that you're faced with an issue. So this is a very simple planning tool that you can use to develop responses to potential crises that will surface or actual crises once they've surfaced. So the summary, we wanted to help you create a crisis management center. Remember, that's the slide that we flipped into the wrong position. And we're suggesting you can use the daily meeting that we provided in the first presentation and some other basic tools, and also to use our Zulu process. And to develop a deployment plan, so we gave you a simple process to do that, which is to break apart from your current org structure if you think it won't meet the mission, and how you might get to a temporary org structure and reporting lines, et cetera, and duties that will. How to develop a strategy to preserve your primary value stream using our process, ARBO, which will help you to break down opportunities into subsets and subsets of subsets so that people can get their arms around them quickly and move. And to engage your people in a secondary value stream. So we talked about how to do that in terms of sussing out hidden treasures in the workplace that you might use to generate revenue that you're not doing now. And then developing contingency plans based on your budgets or other key performance indicators, developing crisis points so that if you become unfavorable in a way that's numeric, you can see it, agree to it, and you can all move towards implementing prepared plans that will help you to recover. So that's what we have for you today. I hope it was helpful. Shortly, you'll have access to all these presentations and tools, et cetera. If there's anything we can do to help you, I hope you'll call us, and we will. We really are keenly interested here in helping in a societal way as opposed to making some kind of killer profit or something. So we just want to see you be able to navigate through this with as little distraction and as little harm as possible.
Okay. Do we have time for a few questions and
Sure.
answers? I'm hoping you guys can chat, but if not, and I don't see the chat bar on there again, what I'm going to do is you can unmute yourselves. What I'll do is I'll make it so that everybody can choose to unmute and speak up with a question if they want. And so if you have a question, speak up, and we'll see where we can go. Andy, or do you have any questions after listening to it?
No, just maybe one real quick thing to add, and this kind of goes back to the risk management insurance piece, and this is more of what we're going to do going forward. You know, I know a lot of you that are in the position have come to the understanding that insurance coverage has been highly unlikely in a situation like this for business interruption and business insurance. But one of the things that we want to do is, as the landscape in the marketplace is changing, to potentially offer coverage in the future for this going forward, it's imperative that we keep track of what costs and what potential costs are lying out there for this type of situation. You know, whether it be loss of revenue, whether it be, you know, the cost that, you know, would have been able to pay our employees while they're off in this situation. So later, if something does change, we're going to be able to gauge that cost going forward, so we know what we can prepare for. Really, that's about it. I know we kind of ran some time a little bit, but if there's any questions in regards to that, you know, I'll be happy to answer those. Shoot us an email, and we'll be able to discuss that at some point.
And as I said, we're going to send out an email to everybody who registered. It'll have links. You'll be able to get to all the documentation, probably more than we were able to show you by quite a bit. And then you'll have our 3 email addresses and phone numbers. Don't hesitate to just call us. You got a question, call us, email us, whatever, and we'll do our best to help you out. Okay.
There are no questions.
Well, if there are no questions, then we're going to end the meeting then. And I appreciate everybody for participating. Thank you very much, Dave.
You bet.
And thank you all. And I'll probably even have the video out there for this. That might take a little bit longer, but I'll get it out there and make it available.
Thank you.